27th, 1942, the South Pacific Ocean burned with the remnants of hope. Commander Edward P. Parker stood on the deck of the USS Northampton, watching the USS Hornet, a fleet carrier, vanish beneath the waves. The flames from her ruptured tanks lit up the night sea like a vast funeral pyre. With her went 140 American sailors and what felt like the last pillar of American naval power in the Pacific. For carriers, Lexington, Yorktown, Wasp, and now Hornet had been lost in just 10 months. Parker, gripping the rail, scrawled into his logbook words he dare not say aloud. At this rate, we'll have nothing left by Christmas. In Washington, Admiral Ernest King faced Congress with numbers so grim they bordered on surrender. Gentlemen, he said, we have one operational fleet carrier left in the Pacific, the Enterprise. She faces 10 Japanese carriers. Simple mathematics suggests we have already lost a war. To many, it seemed the Pacific had been conceded to the rising sun. But across the ocean, in the town of Newport News, Virginia, a welder named Margaret Thompson was just beginning her night shift. Unknown to Commander Parker and Admiral King, this was not the end of the American fleet, but the beginning of one of the most astonishing industrial turnarounds in human history. What followed would not just shape the outcome of the war, but redefine the very nature of naval warfare. The American response was not led by admirals or generals, but by workers, millions of them, armed not with rifles, but with welding torches, blueprints, and grit. In factories and shipyards, on assembly lines and docks, a production miracle was set into motion. American shipbuilding would become the decisive factor in the Pacific theater. It would be proof that a free people, united in crisis, could achieve the impossible. The revolution began with a simple order: build ships like Ford builds cars. Gone were the traditions of slow, craft-based shipbuilding. At Newport News Shipbuilding, a foreman named Clay Bedford told his crew to forget everything they knew, and a former seamstress named Helen Matthews made a suggestion that changed everything. "Why don't you sew it together like fabric?" she asked, watching workers rivet hull plates by hand. The supervisor laughed, then realized she was right. Welding could replace riveting, reducing build times by 75% and requiring fewer specialized skills. Suddenly, anyone could become a shipbuilder with just days of training. And everyone did. Women flooded into the yards, many for the first time holding tools instead of typewriters. By 1943, 40% of Henry Kaiser's shipyard workforce were women. At Norfolk, Emma Rodriguez, a Mexican-American mother of 3, became the fastest riveter in the yard, driving 30 rivets per minute, each one perfect. African Americans, long excluded from skilled trades, now entered in force, thanks to Executive Order 8802, which banned discrimination in defense industries. James Washington, a former sharecropper from Alabama, became a master pipe fitter. He built fuel systems for 5 carriers, each one faster than the last. These weren't just ships. They were lifelines, and every second mattered. Workers knew that every carrier launch meant fewer Marines dying in the jungles of the Pacific. Posters in shipyards showed USS Enterprise fighting alone with the words, "She needs sisters. Build them now." The carriers they built, particularly the Essex-class, were bigger, faster, and tougher than anything afloat. They displaced over 27,000 tons, carried up to 100 aircraft, and could steam at over 33 knots. They were not only replacements, they were superior in every way, and they came in droves. Construction times fell rapidly. The USS Essex was laid down in April 1941 and launched by December 1942. USS Franklin took just 13 months from keel to commissioning. USS Lake Champlain would set the record, built in only 15 months. By late 1943, shipyards were launching a new fleet carrier every 30 days. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, Admiral Ozawa commanded 6 Japanese carriers. Facing him were 17 American carriers, 9 fleet and 8 light. It was not a battle, he later wrote. It was an execution. And the pace didn't slow. While the major naval yards built Essex-class fleet carriers, Henry Kaiser, who had revolutionized Liberty ship production, turned his methods to escort carriers. His Vancouver yard built 50 escort carriers using Liberty ship techniques. One of them, USS Casablanca, went from keel-laying to commissioning in under 8 months. By contrast, Japan Shino, converted from a passenger liner, took 2 full years. Behind every ship was a massive supply chain humming with purpose. Steel came from Pittsburgh, aluminum from Tennessee, arresting cables from Ohio. In Detroit, factories that once made cars now produce standardized parts for carriers across the country. Engineers introduced modular construction, assembling whole sections of ships with wiring and plumbing intact, then slotting them together like puzzle pieces. At the same time, training programs ensured that these ships had crews ready. In Chicago, the Great Lakes became a floating classroom. 2 converted paddle steamers, USS Wolverine and USS Sable, trained hundreds of carrier pilots a month at Navy Pier. By 1944, America wasn't just launching ships, it was launching entire naval task forces, complete with trained air crews. By August 1945, the scale of American production had become almost surreal. 14 Essex-class fleet carriers had seen combat. 3 more were commissioned before the war's end. Add to that 9 Independence-class light carriers, 71 escort carriers, and several older carriers still afloat. Over 100 American carriers faced down Japan's 6 remaining, and those mostly lacked trained pilots. Britain, by comparison, had only 19 of all types. On September 2, 1945, the Japanese surrender delegation sailed into Tokyo Bay. To reach USS Missouri, they passed an American fleet that filled the horizon. Carriers stretched as far as the eye could see. Commander Tamakihira, one of Japan's most decorated officers, later wrote, "We had sunk 4 of their carriers in 1942, and they had replaced each one 3 times over." Even decades later, the scale stunned former Japanese officers. In 1962, Rear Admiral Hideo Yano visited the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, where many of those Essex-class carriers were built. Looking over the slipways, he said, "We knew you were building ships, but we never imagined the scale. How do you fight a nation that can build in 1 yard what we built in our entire empire?" The answer was simple. You don't. You can't. Japan didn't lose to American strategy or tactics. They lost to Margaret Thompson and her welding torch. To the millions of Americans who rose from farms, kitchens, factories, and cities to answer the call, they didn't just build ships. They built freedom. They built victory. They built the future. And the legacy endures. The techniques developed between 1942 and 1945, modular construction, welding, assembly line shipbuilding, became permanent fixtures in global industry. Workers trained in those yards went on to power the post-war boom. Women learned they could master any industrial task. African Americans proved they could do any job when given a chance. Barriers shattered, and a new American middle class emerged. In 1985, on the 40th anniversary of VJ Day, over 5,000 former shipyard workers gathered in Newport News. Margaret Thompson, now 67, addressed them. "They call us the greatest generation," she said. "We weren't great. We were angry. The Japanese sank our ships, killed our boys. We answered the only way we knew how. We built more ships than they could imagine. Every rivet we drove said, 'Remember Pearl Harbor.' In the end, the war wasn't decided in a single moment or battle. but in the sustained, relentless, determined work of free people who refused to accept defeat. From 4 carriers lost in 1942, America built 14 Essex-class fleet carriers that saw combat. Each one a monument to what a democracy can achieve when its freedom is threatened. They didn't just build steel. They built purpose. They didn't just win a war. They changed the world.